The tension was already in the air before Mark Wahlberg stepped onto the stage, so thick it felt like static electricity crawling across the studio floor. You could see it in the way Whoopi Goldberg avoided direct eye contact with Joy Behar. You could hear it in the silence between Sonny, Hostin's usual warm welcome, and the half-hearted applause trying to fill the void. And when Mark finally emerged from the curtain, dressed in a crisp navy suit with just a hint of street-edge bravado, in his walk, the room didn't erupt the way it normally did. No whistles, no cheers. Just polite, clapping tight, nervous. Like everyone already sensed they were about to witness something no one could unsee. "Let's go," Mark whispered under his breath. His jaw flexed as he shook the hands of each co-host one by one, until he reached Joy. She didn't stand, just smiled, wide, too wide. "Welcome back to The View. You're here to talk about your new movie. Another Boston guy with a temper, right?" Boom, first punch, and the cameras weren't even warm yet. Mark held her gaze, didn't blink. Just nodded with the poise of a man who'd been through worse, but never on national television, with a smug smile daring him to lose control. If you're watching this right now, and your jaw's already clenched, yeah, you're not alone. Because this wasn't just another celebrity interview. This was a reckoning, a public showdown between a working-class legend and one of TV's most unfiltered provocateurs. Before we go further, trust me, you're going to want to like, share, and subscribe right now, because what's coming, you will not believe how far this went. You'll want to watch it again, and you'll want your friends to see it too, because this wasn't an interview, it was combat. Mark adjusted his cufflinks with deliberate calm. "Actually," he said evenly, "it's a story about redemption, a man facing who he used to be, trying to fix what he broke." Joy raised an eyebrow. "Ah, so it's autobiographical then?" The audience gasped. Whoopi's face froze. Sonny winced. Even the stage manager looked like she'd swallowed a rock. Mark didn't react non-visibly, but a muscle in his cheek twitched. "You know, Joy," he said slowly, "I came here to talk about the work. If you want to talk about my past, I'm not gonna hide from it." Joy leaned in, arms crossed. "Oh, I don't want to talk about your past, Mark. I want to talk about your pattern, excuse me. You've made a whole career pretending to be the guy who's changed, the underdog. But you're still cashing in on being the angry kid from the street. You're not the everyman, you're Hollywood in a hoodie." The air pressure dropped. Audience dead silent. Mark exhaled slowly, visibly recalibrating. He leaned forward. "You think I've forgotten where I come from?" "No," Joy snapped. "Think you've monetized it." Sudden shift. Whoopi broke in, desperate to de-escalate. "Let's pivot to the film. Maybe watch a clip." "No," Joy interrupted, voice sharp. "Let's finish this. Because for once, I want honesty on this set." Sonny glanced off stage toward the producers. Her eyes said it all. "Do we cut to break? Do we let this keep going?" Mark's jaw tightened again. He didn't look at the crew, didn't look for an out. He looked right at Joy. "You're not asking for honesty," he said quietly. "You're asking for humiliation." Joy leaned in, her voice low and dangerous. "Call it what you want, Mark, but the truth doesn't come with a PR team." Audience murmuring, someone whispered, "This is brutal." Joy kept going. "You talk about redemption, but you never mention who paid the price for your past. You think some community service erases a hate crime. You think a few roles playing good guys makes you one." Mark's face went stone cold. Not rage, not panic, just a dead stop. "Say it," he whispered. "Fine." Joy's voice rose. "You were a thug, you hurt people, and now you act like a role model while you rake in millions. I call BS." Mark didn't. Mouvet just stared. "You don't know me," he said finally, "and you sure as hell don't get to rewrite my life for ratings." The room pulsed with silence. It felt like the moment before a dam breaks. "This isn't about ratings," Joy hissed. "This is about truth. Something you only pretend to care about when the cameras are rolling." Audience stunned, some clapping, some booing, Whoopi, speechless, Sonny, blinking fast, mouth open. Producers waving frantic signals off stage. Mark sat back in his chair, his voice dropped to a whisper. "You know what's funny?" Joy cocked her head. "You sit in that seat every day preaching about respect, about women, about fairness. And then the minute a man comes in here who doesn't fit your narrative, you tear him apart like a game. The crowd shifted. Could you feel it? Joy's face hardened. I'm doing my job. No, Mark said flatly. You're playing God. And just when it seemed like maybe they'd hit a wall of silence, Joy exploded. Oh, spare me the victim act, Mark. You got famous playing tough guys because you were one. You hurt people. You're not a hero. You're a brand. The studio snapped. People gasped. One audience member stood up. A man in the front row shouted, "That's too far." Mark stood, slowly, carefully, not a flinch of rage, but the kind of still fury that lives deep in the chest. I've owned my mistakes, he said. I've carried them. I've worked every day of my life to be better than the person I was. You want to talk about that? Let's talk. But don't you ever pretend you get to define me. Joy flushed, breathing hard. Mark, trembling, but not. From fear? From holding it all in? Whoopi stood next. She looked ready to call security, but before she could say a word, Joy leaned in, voice soft now, almost surgical. That man, and that was it. Gasps, audible, visible. The audience, no longer sure whether to cry, boo, or scream, for the first time, really turned toward the camera. You want to know what remorse looks like? He asked. Then he looked directly into the lens. It looks like walking into rooms like this one, knowing people like you will never let you forget. It looks like taking punches with a smile, and still standing. He looked back to Joy. You're not interested in justice. You're addicted to power, the control room, red lights blinking, an executive producer shouting into a headset, the director holding up his fingers. 10 seconds to break back in the studio, Joy smiled. Maybe I am, but at least I never pretended to be a saint, Mark whispered. No, you just like playing devil. Excuse me. Mark's voice didn't raise, but the quiet edge in it sliced through the tension like a scalpel. The audience didn't know whether to laugh or gasp. Some did both. Others went completely silent. Joy just stared at him. The corner of her mouth still tugging upward like this was all part of the job. You've had quite the colorful past, haven't you? Assault, charges, prison time, hate crime allegations, and yet here you are. Movie star, producer, family man. America loves a redemption story. Whoopi's head turned, eyes darting like she hadn't read that line on the teleprompter. Sonny leaned forward, sensing something was breaking loose, but unsure if she was about to be collateral damage. Mark Wahlberg didn't flinch. He let out a breath, not because he was tired, but because the air had turned sharp with memory. You want to talk about my past, Joy? He asked. Let's talk about yours. Or is that off limits because you're the one sitting behind the desk with the cue cards? That one hit. The room stiffened. The smile slipped just a fraction from Joy's lips, but she held her ground. Oh, don't try to flip this on me, she said. You made the choices, you got the headlines, you wrote the history. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, every inch of his body suddenly shifting from promotional mode to something colder, heavier. The kind of posture that says, you wanted honesty. Buckle up. I was 16 years old, he said, his voice low but firm. I did some horrible things I've spent decades owning up to. I didn't have lawyers spinning it. I had courts. I had prison. I didn't make excuses. I made amends, Joy cut in. But did you know? He said sharply. You don't get to interrupt me while you're digging through 20-year-old headlines to score ratings. I'm here promoting a film about second chances, not sitting trial on live TV. There was no applause, no dramatic music, just dead silence. You could hear the breath catch in Alyssa's throat. Sonny looked down. Even the cameramen weren't moving. Dot and Joy. Joy's mask cracked, just a little, enough for you to see the thrill in her eyes dull into something else, something that almost looked like guilt. People still hurt, she said, quieter now. What you did, I know what I did, Mark said, better than anyone here. But I also know what I've built. I've spent every day since then trying to prove that I'm not that kid anymore. Not to people like you, to the people I hurt, to the communities I affected. You think I get to forget any of that? Joy looked at him now, not as a celebrity, not as a headline, but as a man daring her to see more than ink on a page. But her instinct kicked in. The moment had turned and she didn't like being cornered. You don't get a medal for growing up, she snapped. I'm not asking for a medal, he said. I'm asking for the same thing. We pretend to give every guest who comes on this show basic respect. That landed. The producers in the control room were panicking now, their fingers dancing over the switchboard, wondering whether to cut to commercial or let it roll. Twitter was already exploding, clips being clipped, posted viral in real time. Hashtag Wahlberg vs. Joy was trending before the next breath. Whoopi finally stepped in. Okay, she said gently. Let's take a second. Everybody just let's breathe. This ain't hardball, it's The View. But Joy wasn't done. No, Whoopi, she said, turning toward her co-host. He came here acting like he was promoting a movie about forgiveness. But when I bring up the very thing that makes that theme real, he goes on the offensive. You weren't asking, Mark replied. You were attacking? Joy stood now, not fully but enough to cast her voice farther across the stage. You've had decades to fix your image, Mark. Publicists, agents, managers, red carpets. I have a responsibility to ask the questions people are thinking. No, he said. You have a responsibility to ask questions that come from a place of truth. Not personal bias, not tabloid bait. Is it bias to hold men accountable? She snapped. Is it fairness to never let them move forward? He countered. The words hung there, suspended in midair, like broken glass, and then the audience applauded, hesitantly at first, then louder, not for Joy, not for Mark, for the moment, the raw, unfiltered humanity of it. It was like they all woke up. For a second, this wasn't celebrity fluff or morning TV, it was real. Two people, aged by decades of culture wars, trauma, career scars, facing each other with nothing but words. And history. Whoopi looked up at the producers. No cue for commercial came, so she sat back and let it breathe. The air had shifted, and they weren't done yet. You could have heard a pin drop on the set, even with the hum of studio lights and the distant rustle of cue cards behind the cameras. Every person on that soundstage, from the makeup artist peeking around the curtain to the floor manager, with a frozen headset, knew this wasn't a segment anymore. It was a standoff, and the air between. Mark Wahlberg and Joy Behar had grown so thick you could cut it with a box cutter. Mark sat stiffly in his chair, leaning slightly forward, his forearms on the table, fists clenched, just out of frame. Joy was poised, almost theatrical in her stillness, but her voice, when it finally came, carried the heat of a blade dragged across skin. You're angry, she said, measured, almost satisfied. I get it. Mark chuckled, the kind of bitter, breathless laugh that doesn't come from humor but from disbelief. No, Joy, I'm not angry, he replied. I'm just realizing who I'm actually sitting across from. Joy didn't blink. A woman who's not afraid to hold powerful men accountable. No, he said sharply. A woman who spent so long swinging at shadows that she doesn't know the difference between an honest conversation and a public execution. The audience broke into gasps again, half in support, half in stunned discomfort. But the tension didn't die down. Joy leaned in. Tell me, Mark, do you lose sleep at night? Knowing people still remember the things you did before you had? Your publicist scrubbed the internet clean. Mark's face froze. His jaw flexed. Do you? He asked. That hit her differently. For the first time in the entire segment, Joy Behar's fingers twitched against the rim of her coffee cup. She recovered quickly, but not before the camera caught it. Don't project, she said coolly. This isn't about me. Mark's stare didn't budge. It never is it? Offstage producers had stopped breathing. They weren't cutting to commercial. Not because they didn't want to, but because they couldn't. America was watching. Twitter was melting. Hashtag WahlbergInView and hashtag Joy Goes Nuclear were both trending. And they weren't even 10 minutes into the segment. Behind the scenes, someone on the production staff whispered into a mic, "This is gold or it's a lawsuit." I came here to talk about a film that means something to me, Mark said, voice steady but rising. A film about family, redemption, the struggle to be better. But you what? Joy interrupted, voice rising now too. Thought you'd come in here and get a standing ovation for being a changed man. You think because you've got a few emotional scenes and a press tour behind you that wipes your slate clean. Mark's eyes flashed, double quotes, no. I think I have the right to move forward, he said. But you're still stuck back in 1983, Joy. Sat up straighter. Her face flushed, not with embarrassment, but with something deeper. Offense, rage, or maybe recognition. The crowd responded again, this time more divided. Some clapped, some gasped. One person audibly whispered, "Holy shit!" Whoopi Goldberg finally leaned forward, her voice calm but commanding. "All right. I think we're losing the plot here." But the plot was long gone. This wasn't about the movie or even about redemption. It had become something else entirely, a live, unfiltered war between two cultural relics, each clinging to their version of truth like a shield. Mark turned to Whoopi, softer now. "I respect you, Whoopi, I really do. But you know what it's like to be misunderstood, to carry weight for mistakes you've grown from. At what point are we allowed to be better without being beaten back into the past?" Whoopi sighed. "I know exactly what that feels like, but this show isn't about coddling." Mark nodded. "Then let's not pretend this is about truth either. Let's just call it what it is. Entertainment. And today, I'm the punchline." Joy jumped back in, voice sharper now. "You're not a punchline, you're a headline, and you built yourself into one. Now sit with it." "Gladly," Mark said, "because I've sat with worse, and I've owned it. Can you say the same?" Joy's lips parted, then closed, then parted again. She couldn't answer, and that silence, it echoed louder than any insult either of them had hurled all morning. From backstage, a voice finally cut in over the studio's earpiece. "Cut to break, now." The screen momentarily faded to a shaken Whoopi announcing a commercial, but the damage had been done. When the cameras went dark, Mark sat back in his chair, breathing hard. Joy stared forward, jaw locked, hands trembling ever so slightly. Neither of them spoke. No one dared approach them. Alyssa whispered to Sarah, "This is going to be everywhere in 20 minutes. Sarah just nodded. "It already is." Outside the studio, the crowd had tripled. Protesters holding signs with Wahlberg's mugshot stood next to fans waving movie posters. News crews were pulling up, and inside, security was already preparing exit routes that wouldn't cross paths because this wasn't just an interview gone wrong anymore. This was a public reckoning. And it wasn't over, not by a long shot. For a moment, silence reigned over the studio like a fog no one dared to breathe through. The energy wasn't just tense, it was electric, like the room itself had stopped spinning. Then came the slow, sharp sound of Joy Behar setting down her coffee mug, not slamming it, just enough to echo. She turned her full body toward Mark Wahlberg. "You think I'm cruel," she said, voice low, clipped. "I think I'm the only person at this table with the guts to say what half the world is thinking." Mark didn't blink. "No, Joy, you're the person who thinks that being loud is the same as being right." The studio wasn't just watching anymore, it was locked in. You could feel it in the crew's stillness, in the way even Whoopi leaned back, choosing for once not to referee. There are moments in live television where everything becomes something else entirely. This wasn't a talk show anymore. This was war. "You've made a career out of selling second chances," Joy snapped. "And I'm supposed to just clap along because you play a hero in a uniform now?" Mark laughed, dry and bitter. "You think I'm selling something? I'm surviving something. You sit up here judging people for their past like yours doesn't exist." Now, Joy's expression cracked just slightly. Just enough. "Excuse me, you heard me. You want justice, but only when the cameras are on." Whoopi inhaled, like she might say something, then let it go. Let it burn. Joy's voice turned quiet, but lethal. "You don't get to use your past as a shield, Mark, not when people with less privilege than you are buried by theirs. And you don't get to weaponize outrage as your brand," Mark snapped, "pretending to be a truth teller when all you're doing is setting fires and walking away." Then came the sound that shook them both. Applause. Not the whole crowd. Eyes to harden. Enough for America watching, tweeting, rewinding, to realize this wasn't just about Wahlberg's redemption arc. It was about power, about who gets to hold the mic and who gets held to the flame. Commercial break. Hesitated, asking, "Do we cut this?" One producer muttered, "We'd be idiots too." Backstage, publicists were already on their phones. Wahlberg's team scrambling, Joy's team silent. The camera crew, still rolling, unofficially, because this wasn't over. Not yet. Back from break. No music, no laughter, just silence. Joy adjusted her mic. "You want to tell your side, Mark? Go ahead. You've got the floor." Mark didn't smile. "No, I'm good, because I don't need to prove myself to you." or anyone else looking for a villain to feed their algorithm. He turned to the camera. You want to talk about mistakes? Fine. I've made them. I've paid for them. And I'll probably pay for them for the rest of my life. But you know what I won't do? I won't sit here and let a talk show rewrite my story just to sell an ad spot between hot flashes and cooking segments. The gasp from the audience was real. Audible, some clapped, some booed. Joy stood up. You want to take shots? I just did. They were both standing now, not yelling, just their two immovable objects in a war neither of them started, but neither of them would walk away from. Sarah looked frozen. Alyssa leaned back in her chair. Sunny blinked rapidly, like she'd just watched something break in slow motion. Whoopi finally rose to, okay, that's it. Show's over. Joy didn't sit. It wasn't just a segment, it was personal. Outside the studio, chaos erupted. Reporters, #protesters waving signs, some calling Mark a symbol of toxic privilege, others praising him for standing his ground. Joy's name trended right beside his, both of them cast as heroes and villains, depending on who you asked, but neither cared about the headlines, because deep down, both knew what had just happened. This wasn't about forgiveness, or politics, or even truth. It was about the price of power and who gets to keep it when the world's watching. Later that night, Mark sat in his hotel room, suit jacket tossed over a chair, TV still running reruns of the segment. Watched Joy, watched the exact moment the conversation turned into something bigger. His phone buzzed nonstop. Requests for interviews, damage control, praise, threats. But the only thing he answered was a text from his mother. Proud of you for standing tall, Joy Behar. She didn't flinch either. The next morning on The View, she walked onto set like nothing had happened. But when she sat down, the crowd gave her a standing ovation. Not for being right, not for being wrong, but for being unapologetically present, and in a world where everyone's spinning. Most powerful thing of all, the confrontation between Mark Wahlberg and Joy Behar didn't just break daytime television norms. It cracked something deeper, a conversation about redemption, power, public morality, and the cost of turning truth into entertainment. Because at the end of the day, we're all watching, but only a few are brave or reckless enough to speak. When the spotlight burns, the hottest dot, and now, the world will never forget the day Mark Wahlberg and Joy Behar set the stage on fire.